really disturbed my relatives who did not understand what's wrong with me.
I think it tells us so much about what really scares us.
I wouldn't even put it in the conversation for like best horror movie of all time.
Welcome one, welcome all to ScreenRant's Challenge My Goats. My name is Liam Crowley and I am your shepherd through this journey of superlatives as we crown some of the greatest topics in film, television, and entertainment history. Today, we are tackling the topic that only makes sense on October 31st, the greatest horror movie of all time. Our expert today is MovieWeb deputy editor and writer, Miss Britt Hayes. Britt, what makes you qualified to declare the greatest horror movie of all time? And who is your goats?
Okay, so I'm Britt. Hi. I would say, first of all, I've been watching horror movies since before I could walk, probably. I was a latchkey kid. I was neglected, and my babysitter was the television. Also, maybe like a third parent. I was just plopped in front of the TV and let to watch whatever I want, and that was most often slasher movies. I was obsessed with slasher franchises. I was obsessed with Jason and Freddy and Chucky, and I would watch USA Up All Night and really disturb my relatives who did not understand what's wrong with me. I think, you know, if you got to know me a little bit better, you'd say, oh, well, this really explains why you are the way that you are. But yeah, so I was just raised on horror. I was raised on like all kinds of horror, prestige horror, B horror, like really campy, culty stuff, absolute trash. I mean, the whole gamut. And my first big adult editing, writing job was for a little tiny horror website called Brutal as Hell. And I started writing reviews and news for them. And I just feel like, you know, that's the story of like most people who get into like film criticism and writing about movies is they start in writing about horror. It's the same as like when you first get into movies. For a lot of people who really love movies, like horror is their gateway into movies. So I've spent a lot of time in my career and my personal life just absorbing as much horror as possible. And yeah, I don't know why I seem so happy. So with all of that said, my goat for the greatest horror movie of all time is also my favorite movie of all time, Alien.
A worthy selection. 1979, the film that spawned the franchise that's still active and very well alive today. Britt, I'm excited to hear this debate once we introduce our challenger. She's the editor-in-chief at Dread Central. She's the director and producer of the award-winning horror film Bystanders, which came out earlier this year. It's Mary Beth McAndrews. Mary Beth, what makes you qualified to challenge our goats?
Hello. I don't know if I am, but I think I am. I don't know. We'll find out. But I work in horror. I love horror. Much like Britt, I have been watching horror from an inappropriately young age. I saw Jaws when I was 4, thought that the toilet was going to be like full of sharks, the bathtub. And of course, instead of like running away from that feeling, I have been chasing it ever since. So I was the kid that showed kids, you know, messed up horror movies at slumber parties. I watched I Spit on Your Grave at a slumber party once. Like, you know, like we're like very weird behavior, you know? And of course I channeled that weird behavior into a career in a surprising way that my family is actually still very shocked by. And I think that's hilarious. But like Britt, I started writing for small websites, and I love movies and writing so much. I took a horror movie class in my undergrad and was like, I must do this for the rest of my life. So, I've been editor-in-chief at Dread Central for 4 years. I made a horror movie. My whole life is like talking about horror. So I'm so stoked to be here just to do exactly that, talk about horror.
I find people who like gravitate towards horror movies so fascinating because for me, it's like an exercise. I got to psych myself up. I saw Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 this past weekend at the Roxy in New York City. And I only went for the power of friendship. I wanted to see my friends and I said, I will put myself through this absolute slasher monstrosity in the best way possible. It was a very well-made film, but good God, it is.
Have you seen have you seen any of the other ones?
Yeah, with the lights on. and
okay, I was going to say, if that was your only Halloween
tab.
Experience, I was going to laugh if that was your only experience with a Halloween movie, if it was Rob Zombie's second Halloween.
It was
not even the first one.
It was the only experience like that, and I just genuinely felt like I was being stalked the whole time. So I'm excited to hear you guys talk about horror and not necessarily watch horror per se. But I have seen both of your selections. I do know what Mary Beth has up her sleeve. We'll get to that in just a bit. Britt, you got to lay the foundation for us. What makes Alien the greatest horror movie of all time?
Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying that I am a far better writer than I am a speaker, so I may ramble a little. There's a reason that people write, you know? So yeah, I mean, God, there are like so many reasons, okay? I mean, first of all, I mean, it's terrifying, right? I mean, and it has one of the greatest creature designs in cinema history. That is entirely practical. It is a man. It is literally a man. Well, 3 different guys, 1 main guy and 2 stunt guys, in a suit, in a rubber suit. And there's something like so tactile. I mean, obviously, it's real, like, right? Like you want something tangible and not special CGI effects, like not computer goo. You feel so real. Like this thing is like in the room with these people. It's actually happening and not just because somebody put clip art in it. And that alone, I mean, I think is just so incredible. And the design of the creature, H.R. Geiger's design, which is so beautiful and haunting and like evocative of like BDSM. So it feels like something you should not be looking at, like regardless of your age, like, oh, I don't know if I'm supposed to be seeing this. And I just, you know, you hadn't seen anything like it. I mean, certainly I hadn't when I was a kid and I first watched it. And that was, you know, decades after or over a decade after it came out. But yeah, so that's one, right? Incredible creature design. 2, amazing lead actress, right? Sigourney Weaver, just, you know, if we're going to talk about like final girls and that classic horror trope of like the woman who survives at the end after like watching everyone get slaughtered and being chased down by this horrible monster or man, which is usually both. And she, like Sigourney Weaver as Ripley, like she is like in a lot of ways, like she's the ultimate final girl. I mean, like arguable for sure. But yeah, I mean, just she's so badass too. I mean, like seeing her at the end, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but just like seeing this iconic shot of Sigourney Weaver at the end of the movie, like after she has been through hell and back. I mean, just like, it's astonishing. So she gives an incredible performance. And, you know, one of the things that's so fascinating about
Britt, I'm going to have to call you there. I gave you like 20 extra seconds on your 2 minutes because you were in a vibe.
Holy
but we'll save that.
I didn't even get into it.
We'll save that next point for the debate itself. You got plenty of time there. Mary Beth,
okay.
Now I put the impossible task on you. Tear it to shreds. Why is Alien not the greatest movie of all time? Horror movie of all time?
So this sucks because like I love Alien, and so like trying to tear Alien apart is an impossible task here. And so like I don't know how well I'm going to do, but I think just framing it around what I know my pick is, I think Alien, when it comes down to it, if we're going to get like really in the nitty gritty, it is the best science fiction film of all time, but maybe not the best horror movie of all time. And I understand that is getting down to marketing labels and genre labels that are very arbitrary. But from my perspective, there is so much incredible work in this movie, but it is so much around the world building and the science fiction elements of it all. And that Alien, again, while it is a monster and it is so scary, I think the science fiction of it all really is what makes it such a great science fiction movie, but not necessarily the greatest horror movie of all time. And I feel weird saying that, and I'm so sorry, Britt, that we're fighting about this. It's a very difficult thing to fight about because it truly is like such an incredible film. But I think like when it comes down to it, it is more science fiction than horror. And I think that while it introduces a lot of really great stuff to the pantheon of the genre, I think it borrows so much from the genre to create something that science fiction had never seen before. And perhaps this is just getting pedantic, so I'm trying to find a way to argue about this. But I think that so much of Alien is more in the science fiction realm, the action realm, and that's thinking of the later films, not the original, which I needed to focus on. But I think something about that keeps me from thinking of it as the greatest horror movie of all time. Definitely up there for sure, but to me, it is the greatest science fiction film of all time. And I think that's where I'm going to end it, because I'm not really sure how else to argue about Alien not being one of the greatest horror movies of all time.
I really like this angle, because I was going to say in my head, if there was a way that I was going to combat Alien in a debate like this, it is saying it's the greatest, but in this other category. So, Mary Beth, you got a challenger pick for us. What are you bringing to the table?
I am bringing to the table Bob Clark's 1974 slasher film, Black Christmas.
Wow.
The stage has been set. Alien 1979 versus Black Christmas 1974. A couple 70s horror films going at it here in our debate. Britt, I saw a reaction there right off the gate. What's your experience with Black Christmas?
Look, I've seen Black Christmas a couple times. It's fine. It's a fun, festive horror movie for the holidays. And honestly, like, Mary Beth, like, is dressed as, like, festive horror today. And, like, this really cute little, like, sweater and, like, beanie. So she's really selling it. But no, I mean, like, I think Black Christmas is really fun. I do think it has, like, some really great, like, iconic imagery in it and some really spooky stuff. But I wouldn't even put it in the conversation for, like, best horror movie of all time. I just, like, wouldn't. I mean, like, if we're talking about, like, best, like, you know, Christmas horror or, like, you know, best slashers, okay. I think you can make, like, a really good argument for it if we're talking, like, you know, the pedantic stuff, right? But, like, I think that, like, yeah, I mean, it's just, it's good, but, like, is it great? Is it a masterpiece? Alien is a masterpiece. Alien is, like, okay, because here's the other thing I want to get into, and I think that this will open things up for a really interesting discussion, right? Because I think what makes a horror movie what makes some of the best horror movies really great, right, is that they are about more than just scaring you, that they're about something, right? And, like, Alien has all this incredible thematic stuff. There's all this psychosexual stuff going on with a lot of the Geiger designs, the threat of men being sexually assaulted by, like, something which you don't really see very often, which I think gets under the audience's skin in a really subconscious ways. There's this really great stuff with, like, the misogyny of, like, the men not listening to Ripley, and she, like, knows better than they do, and it's frustrating, and all of that stuff makes it so relatable. And then you have, like, this capitalist company, like, shadowy capitalist company overseeing everything in a future where we're exploiting resources on other planets. So it doesn't seem that far-fetched. And it has only gotten more relevant in the time since it was released. Yeah, I mean, like, there's just so much going on with, like, the gender dynamics and yeah, I think that there's a lot more to pick apart in Alien than there is, like, in Black Christmas.
Britt came to argue today. Those are very well thought out points. And Mary Beth, you know, I hate to spin it back to you. You're a little hesitant to attack Alien out the gate, but your baby was just attacked Black Christmas. So I need you to tell me right now what makes Black Christmas one of the greatest horror movies of all time. And in your opinion, what makes it the greatest of all time?
Okay, so Britt really got me ready to fight. So thank you, Britt. And I think, like, so, okay, Black Christmas is about so much more than a slasher. So it really is the Proto-Slasher. Bob Clark made this in 1974. This is before Halloween. This was before the slasher boom in the States. He's taking all of these tropes that we've seen in giallo films in the 70s, in the 60s, and he's making something that no one had seen before. Why this movie to me is the greatest of all time is because of how ahead of its time it is in so many different ways. So it's ahead of its time in its kind of slasher format. You know, we've seen it in Italian and European horror, but if you're not, like, a horror head like we are, you're like, I have no fucking idea what you're talking about. Or I have no idea what you're talking about. So with this movie, we're introduced to this format of a slasher with this villain. But then we're also ahead of its time because, Britt, you mentioned Alien talks about a lot of things and it's not just about scaring, but that's what Black Christmas does. Black Christmas, to me, is such a deeply political movie because, one, it's very vocally about abortion. Jess, the main character, says to her boyfriend, I'm getting an abortion. I do not want to be a wife. I don't want to give up my dreams, and you can't tell me what to do. It's a very much like her body, her choice movie in a way that a lot of films, even today, I think are hesitant to talk about. But it was very very obvious in this movie. And also my bisexual chaotic queen, Barb, is in this film, and she is canonically bisexual. She's reading Playboy, and so she's a queer character. So I think there's actually a lot of really cool conversations happening in this movie that, yes, is this like holiday horror slasher, but there are a lot of really incredible conversations going on about the like bodily autonomy, and especially from a male director in that time, it's like pretty surprising and very progressive. And then, you know, we talked about the final girl with Ripley, and I think Jess is the proto final girl, and she kind of becomes this interesting kind of blueprint, but a very different blueprint. And I love her against Ripley because I think that they go against type. You think about the final girl on Halloween, Laurie Strode. Jess in this movie is sexually active. You know, she is kind of like just a normal college girl, but she still is the survivor who sees her friends get killed. And so there's so many things that are happening in Black Christmas that are ahead of its time, politically, format, and also just the killer in it. Its killer is the scariest killer I've ever seen in a movie. You barely ever see him. You see his eye. He says the scariest stuff on the phone when he's doing his horrible prank calls. His murders are ruthless. I think it is such a disturbing killer in such a quiet way, which I think proves just like the power of horror and the power of what Bob Clark was able to do even on this like limited budget.
We have such really good foundations here. And limited budget, I'm glad you brought that up, because Black Christmas, I was reading, was made for less than $700,000, which is insane even in 1974. And honestly, shout out to Alien too, because Alien's budget was around $11 million and grossed over $100 million worldwide. I'm sure that's
like pretty low for a movie. Like, I know like in those dollars, that's still high, but I will give Alien credit for being able to still make something on like a relatively low budget.
Yeah, and spawning, you know, a crazy franchise. Both of the legacies of these pictures, I think, are so unique because they're both smash successes in their own right. Alien spawns this great franchise, while Black Christmas has that cult success and gets some remakes and continues to just kind of permeate through horror conversations over the course of, 5 decades now. Britt, to throw it back to you, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but I always like to get the nostalgia temp check for anyone's goats. I know I have my greatest of all times in certain categories that are purely biased because I was watching it for the first time when I was like 8 years old and purely innocent, and the greatest thing in the world was whatever I was watching on screen. So for you, you mentioned you first watched Alien 10 years after it came out. Paint the picture for me. Where were you? Who are you with? How are you taking Alien in for the first time?
So it was more than 10 years. I definitely saw clips or like bits of it on TV as a kid, and I don't think I sat down and fully watched it like in a dedicated setting until like I was 14 or 15. And that was like really when I was really digging into movies and getting really obsessive about checking the boxes at Blockbuster. Like, oh, this movie has this person in it and that person from that thing, you know, or just like, oh, it's the same director as this movie I love. I need to watch it. And I had always been curious about Alien and knew, you know, a little bit about it. I think honestly, like my initial exposure to Alien might have been in Spaceballs. Like, and like the scene spoofing the chest burster, like that scene was so funny to me and so insane. And I was like, what is that? What is going on here? And, you know, as a kid also loved and watched a lot of Looney Tunes. It was like, this is insane. What is going on? And then, yeah, like seeing like where it actually came from. I mean, I love that too, when you're like a little pop culture nerd and like, you know, you've been exposed to things through like osmosis. And so then you finally get to see where it came from. Like you hear the iconic line in Star Wars, you know, and you're like, oh, this inspired like 800 things that I love. So yeah, sitting down and finally watching Alien when I was a teenager, I just fell in love with it. I was like, I can't believe they can make movies like this, like, and that this was made so long ago, but it's still so good. I mean, especially when you're like a young teen too, I think a lot of them, you know, are like, oh, like an older movie, like that's going to be kind of boring, but you know, it still felt like it felt really timeless, you know, like you could make it today the exact same way and it would still be incredible.
Yeah, Alien holds up in a big way. Mary Beth, for you, Black Christmas, what was your first experience watching it?
Okay, Okay, so I'm not actually as nostalgic for Black Christmas. I actually watched it I think I watched it in 2019 for the first time because I used to be a little snob who was like old horror movies are dumb. When I was in high school, I was lame. Like I've learned, I've obviously learned, but I co-host a podcast and someone picked Black Christmas for us to discuss. And I was like, finally, I'll get a reason to watch this. I watched it and like my mind, I had one of those moments where I was like, it's like, it was like the movie the slasher I had been looking for because I'm not really a big slasher fan. I like slashers, but like they're not my kind of go-to subgenre. I think, but then I saw Black Christmas and I was like, oh, I get it. Something about seeing Black Christmas kind of like made something click in my brain about horror. And it kind of, while I had been such a horror lover, it completely kind of shifted my thinking about a lot of the genre and like where it has come from and how it has grown. So I think like while Black Christmas isn't, it's not as iconic, I think, as Alien. It doesn't get as much, like pop culture recognition. And I get that. But I think like it has crafted, I had already said this, like one of the scariest killers because it was a movie that I was so prepared for it to be kind of cheesy. And I was not prepared for how freaked out I was watching it. And I think a movie that's able to still kind of instill this terror and dread in someone's heart, even if they're watching it for the first time when they're in their 20s, like I think that really says something about the movie.
I think it's fair to say you both passed the nostalgia temp check. There's no memory of going to the drive-in and getting a bunch of concessions and being with your friends and that blinding, your perception of the film. I think you both pass in spades for sure. I want to talk about the scares here specifically because horror movies, film in general has so many different boxes you can check and film is subjective. That's one of the best parts of the medium. But what I find so fascinating with horror is there are different types of scares. I just referenced Halloween 2 with Rob Zombie. That has a ton of jump scares and slasher scares and the stuff that makes me have to hide in my sweatshirt and not be able to take in the plot because I'm so terrified of what's lurking. But then you have other things like atmosphere scares, fear of the unknown. Just the overall plot can be scary at times. So Britt, talk to me about the scares in Alien and what make those scares in the category of it being worthy of best of all time.
I mean, wow, it's a tall order. We've already talked about Guy in Suit, and I just get so excited about Guy in Suit. It's what I really love about the new Noah Hawley's Alien Earth series. Like, I know Noah Hawley, very divisive, but the Guy in Suit stuff in that, like every time he was on screen, I was like, Guy in Suit. It's a guy in a suit.
It's so good, though.
It's so good.
Alien, I know we're arguing, but Alien Earth was really good.
It is really good. But yeah, so we've talked about that. If you even just going through like the life cycle of because the movie is sort of tracking along with the life cycle of the Xenomorph, right? So we come to the eggs in the initial spaceship. And before we even get to the eggs, right, you have this like really great shot of they answer this distress call. They go to this like abandoned ship and they're like, what's going on? And there's this huge guy. There's this huge alien that's like fossilized, like mummified almost, and it has like a big hole in its chest. And you're like, what the hell happened here? And the movie does not stop down to really like address what happened. We never really find out exactly what happened. It's inferred. You definitely learn because they're about to find out what happened to that guy, right? It's like, then they find the eggs and we get like the first inklings of like something is going on here. And it's the production design and also the creature design. It's just so interesting and creepy and it's unlike anything you've seen, but that's also got elements of stuff you have seen. So it's sort of like insectile. It's sort of, prehistoric in some way. And I think that when you can recognize something or identify with it, that makes it a little more scarier because it feels more real to you, even when it's really fantastical. And then, getting right into like the face hugger again, I think that there's something so fascinating there with the idea of this thing that looks vaginal and that has like a protrusion that comes out that's very phallic and like basically sexually assaults its victims and impregnates them against their will. And that's terrifying. And you don't really see, sexual assault has been used so much in the horror genre in really cheap ways for scares, like for decades, and in some ways that are really smart and in some ways that really suck. And Alien takes like a completely different approach to it by sort of removing the human on human element and instead making it this alien that is committing an act that is, again, recognizable to us, but is being done in a way that we haven't seen and by something that we're unfamiliar with. And there's like an uncanny quality to that. And again, I think for like male viewers, especially watching it, are probably feeling really uncomfortable because they are not used to seeing that happen to men. It's not something that's talked about when it happens in the real world a lot. And to see it on screen, it's like, oh, well, if that guy's getting screwed over this way, like he's getting completely obliterated, like no one's safe, maybe. Yeah. And then like, I think like the chest burster scene is just like a really good like encapsulation of the way that Ridley Scott, who I haven't even mentioned at this point, the great Ridley Scott, I love him so much. The way he really like maintains and builds the suspense, you know, it's just, it starts with a little cough and then very slowly it's like something is wrong here. And you think, well, maybe he's choking, but no. Then something bursts out of his chest. This little guy, who's got like little shiny teeth. I love his little teeth; they're so fun. And yeah, I mean, it's from there. It's like all hell breaks loose. You know, now they're being stalked around the ship by this like. Eventually a huge xenomorph that seems unkillable, that spits acid blood, that you know, they have no like nothing to really compare it to. Like, you know, how are we supposed to kill this thing? I mean, it's so good. And in that way, I think it is indebted to the slashers in some way too. In the like being stalked and hunted kind of thing. Yeah.
I think the theme of what you're saying here is those unsettling, the discomfort scares, the ones that, like you said, get under your skin and never give you any sense of safety when you're watching the film. Mary Beth, to come to you, the scares in Black Christmas. What about them? Put it in the conversation for best of all time.
So I think, you know, Britt talks a lot about the scares in Alien and how, you know, they feel relatable, but, you know, they are different with the context of the extraterrestrial. And I think that Black Christmas is so scary because it feels so real. There isn't an alien or a guy in a suit. That would still be funny, though. There's no man in a suit. It's just people. And I think what's interesting, and this is maybe just so annoying, I think what's so interesting about these kinds of conversations is I think it tells us so much about what really scares us, because I think it's so hard to like pick an objectively like greatest horror movie because everyone is so scared by different things. And so like talking about Black Christmas is like very much telling about what the hell scares me. And I think like what is so scary about Black Christmas is how real it feels. This killer, this guy, who we only ever hear his terrible, terrible prank phone calls where he's talking to himself, screaming obscenities, or we only see his eye in the doorway. Billy is his name. We don't really like understand his motivations. We don't really have any context of who he is. All we know is that he might have lived in this house, and we were not going to be thinking about the 2006 remake. That is not part of this discussion in terms of what the canon is, but Billy's character, I think, is one of the most disturbing because there isn't just no background. There's no resolution. There's no guy in a mask. It's just some really unhinged guy doing something terrifying and absolutely obliterating these women in a house that they live in. Like, he's in the walls, in the ceiling. He's everywhere and nowhere at once. And I think like Britt kind of talked about this a little bit. He's like a xenomorph, but it's before this came out. I mean, there really is like this feeling of like danger in this movie that I think that a lot of horror movies have been chasing. And, you know, there's a lot of spectacle in Alien that makes it so scary and so entertaining to watch. But I think with Black Christmas, there's no entertainment factor to me. As like, obviously it's entertaining, it's a horror movie, but to me, it's much more gut-wrenching, much more visceral, much more horrifying, especially as they start finding all their friends dead, as they start trying to really comprehend what's going on and then they connect the dots about these really unhinged phone calls they're getting. So much about this is just so deeply upsetting. And the fact that at the end of the movie, there's no resolution, like we think there is, but there's none, is just even more disturbing. And like, this is before this whole, like, you know, the elevated horror trend people talk about. This movie is doing a lot of that stuff in such interesting ways in 1974. So I think the scares in Black Christmas are so, once again, ahead of their time because you don't even see the guy. Like, you can't really identify with him. Like, he's a monster. He's not he's a person, but because you never see him, he feels more inhuman. And I think that there's just so much intelligence going on in crafting these very low budget, unnerving scares that aren't even in the kills. It's just like how he talks and how they look up a staircase and things like that. And I think that, Bob Clark had a lot to do with how we think about scares today. So that is my pick. That is my truncated.
I want to say really quickly before I let Britt rebuttal there. Fear of the unknown seems to be what Mary Beth is summing up here, and I can speak from experience because every time I open my credit card app and it says you have a new credit score update. Fear of the unknown. You got me. I'm terrified right now. Britt, continue.
Well, I mean, like, not to argue in Mary Beth's favor, but like, I think like, no, I mean, like what she's saying is like, one, I really want to rewatch Black Christmas because it's been a really long time and I had forgotten about like the abortion subplot thing and so much. I mean, like, yeah, but I think like it having the low budget really lends that like realism to it, right? And also just like the way you're describing it, I'm just thinking like, oh, wow, like there's that theory that like everything is Gamergate. But like Gamergate kind of started with Black Christmas, didn't it?
I mean,
and
I'm just like,
I'll say on that note too, but having a low budget does force creativity. Like, and this goes beyond horror too. Some of the most successful films of all time are the ones who are on such a constrained budget. I always think back to Deadpool from 2016. Hey, make this thing for under $60 million, and boom, it spawned one of the most successful superhero franchises active today. I don't want to get off topic though by talking about Deadpool. I want to wrap up this debate with your closing statements. There was one question I really wanted to ask, so if you can format it into your closing statement within 60 seconds, that would be lovely. You both picked movies from the 1970s, and it's very clear that they inspired a lot of horror that would come in the following decades. But were they greats for their time? Were they the titans of the 70s, of the 80s, of that 20th century? Or can they still hold up today against some of the horror greats that are coming out nowadays? I think of the Conjuring franchise. I think of everything that happened with Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, stuff like that. So in each of your closing statements, I'd love for you to also tell me why they're not just greats of their time. They are greats for a timeless genre. Britt, we'll start with you.
I think I've already kind of gotten into this a bit, but I mean, like the themes of Alien are really timeless. I mean, I think, I can't remember who originally said this or whatever, but I mean, like, it's something that you think about in storytelling, right? Is that like the more specific you get, weirdly, like there's a paradox, the more relatable it is. If you can get really specific in the story that you're telling and the experiences that you're exploring, then you will be able to relate to even more people because they're relating to feelings. And, horror movies are all about the visceral and the feelings, right? It's all feelings. I mean, the two most subjective genres are comedy and horror. I mean, like, and they share a lot in common, weirdly, but like, it's just that like it is so specific in the story that it's setting up and telling of just like, here is a crew of a spaceship and they get to an abandoned spaceship and they discover an alien and it is terrorizing them in space, and what are they going to do? And it remains timeless, I think, just because of the practicality, the set design, the performances, the things that it's talking about. I mean, those are as real today as they were in the 70s.
Britt said earlier that she's not a talker, but you make some very well thought out points when you speak. I never want to wrap you up. I'm like, I don't want to interrupt this flow state you're in right now. That's where I feel a little awkward as a host. Mary Beth, 60 seconds to wrap us all up. What makes Black Christmas the greatest horror movie of all time? And also tell me why it still would be great today.
Black Christmas endures. I think it really is. It is very 70s, but also in what it's talking about politically, it endures till today. And, it wasn't really a hit when it first came out. This movie was like an indie Canadian slasher. It wasn't this big box office crazy smash, but it's gained a lot of cult following over the years. And I think that proves why, and that cult following really proves why it endures today. And I think between the incredible political messages for the 70s, these really amazing female performances and characters, and this disturbing killer there's just so much uncertainty wrapped up in this, in a package that feels familiar now, but in 1974, we don't have sorority horror. We don't have sorority girls getting slaughtered yet all the time in horror movies and things like that. And this is such a blueprint for the decades to come. And I still feel like it's a blueprint today. And that is why Black Christmas is the greatest horror movie of all time. Yes, it's holiday horror, but it's so much smarter than just Christmas lights and Christmas trees and presents. It's so much scarier and more disturbing than the initial holiday sheen.
Two wonderful closing statements to wrap up Challenge My Goat's best horror movie of all time. Guys, I'm torn between the two because for me, my horror grading scale is, did it scare me? It must have been good. That is how I judge every horror movie. I walked out of Halloween Ends in 2022 being like, I think that was the scariest horror movie of all time just because of my recency bias. So that is where my temp check goes for anything
Everyone
horror.
has different experiences with horror movies. That's why they're great.
I have a couple more to watch before October 31st. Spoiling that we're recording this before October 31st, but I always like to put myself through these things for the sake of a good plot and also for the sake of diversifying my palette a little bit. If you disagree,
exposure therapy.
It kind of is, isn't it? If you disagree with our GOAT selections, head on over to ScreenRant.com. If you're listening to this podcast, in the article, scroll down to the comments section and leave your selections. Let us know who your greatest horror film of all time is. So many other great ones that are still on the table. The Exorcist was one I forgot to mention earlier. I would even argue the Babadook from recent memory. That is one of the best hidden detail scares I've ever seen in film ever, when it's the coat rack and he's just there and it takes you 5 seconds. You go, oh my God, there he is. And I had to turn on the lights the first time I watched that movie. Oh my God, still gets under my skin. If you make a compelling argument, we will read it on the show next week. So in the vein of that, last week we covered the best horror actor of all time, and a couple comments we have here. One coming from Takes You Didn't Know You Had. Doug Jones, guys, the gentleman in Buffy, the fawn in Pan's Labyrinth, and also literally 183 other iconic horror stories. You don't even know it's him in any role. A very well argued selection there from Takes You Didn't Know You Had.
Mac Tonight.
One more time.
He was the McDonald's mascot, Mac Tonight, the big like moonhead guy.
Wait, that's right.
That's Doug Jones?
Guy. Doug Jones is Mac Tonight. Yeah. I have like a little Mac Tonight action figure across the room, but yeah.
That man gets so much work and we don't even know it's him. Flowers for Doug Jones. One more comment from Tedzilla, who says, I respectfully submit that Peter Cushing be 1B to Boris Karloff's 1A. English gentlemen both. Cushing is the only other horror actor to explore all the corners as Karloff did. He played heroic, swashbuckling characters. He played villainous ones as well. Two well thought out arguments from our audience here at ScreenRant. Do you guys have any selections for greatest horror actor of all time?
Man, are we talking just like, actors who've done a lot of work in the genre?
That's where it's tough, because Boris Karloff was ultimately argued for being just Frankenstein, if I'm not mistaken. The other selection was Vincent Price, who has a big diversity in his catalog of work. So it's hard. It's any of these arguments are always hard to make. I would say nowadays, right now, someone like Bill Skarsgård is making a big argument because of the diversity of his catalog and also the best of his best. But then you could also go the final girl route, because is a horror actor just someone who's playing the monsters, or is it someone who's also playing the victim in distress? So it's a tough one to put you both on the spot for. If you don't have your selections, we'll have to have you back on.
I mean, like, you can have there's so many, right? It's like you could talk like Jamie Lee Curtis, like her whole run through Halloween. I mean, well, you kind of have to take out like those last two. I think the first movie and that last trilogy is like really great, and they should have ended it there. Like, it would have been iconic, but like, yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis has like had a multi-decade run that is pretty incomparable.
How about you, Mary Beth?
Tony Todd was the first person, I think. I think he's so iconic as Candyman, but he also was a guy, like, so sad that he just recently passed away, but he was a guy that was in so many indie horror projects. Like, he was such a supporter of the genre, and he was in so many movies, and also he was just like one of the most iconic villains in horror history too. So he is someone that's a more recent person, I think, that pops into my head first is Tony Todd.
Great selections. And like I said, if you have a compelling argument, we will read it on the show next week. Looking forward to hearing all the horror film suggestions that we have from this one. Speaking of next week, it's my time to shine, baby. We are arguing the greatest boy band of all time. I never thought I'd get the chance to talk about this stuff on a microphone, and I am so overqualified to moderate this one. And I'm coming with the 2010s hits. I'm not going to spoil who I'm coming with because I'm not debating in this one. But if I just hear Backstreet Boys and New Kids on the Block, I'm coming with the new school. I'm ready. I'm very excited. Guys, Britt, Mary, Beth, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on our podcast. Before we get out of here, I'd love to hear what you guys got going on. Britt, anything you want to plug, where can people find you?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Britt Hates. Same screen name or new screen name. What is it? 1999. I just went back in time. Same username, Britt Hates at Instagram. And you can find me over at MovieWeb, where I am the, again, deputy editor. I also like to call myself the Madam Web of MovieWeb.
I like that. That's fun.
My web connects us all. And I have some exciting stuff coming up that I can't really talk about yet, but I will have a little book project that I get to announce in the next few months. So follow me on social media if you want to know. Yeah.
Post notifications on for Britt Hayes. I love to see it. Mary Beth, what about you? Where can the people find you? What you got coming up?
So you can find me on Instagram at mb.mcandrews. You can find me on Blue Sky at mbmcandrews. I am leaving Dread Central to just work on some other projects. I have a book coming out next year about Paranormal Activity, the movie, so keep an eye on that. My movie Bystanders is streaming wherever you watch your movies. If you're looking to add a nasty little micro-budget rape revenge movie to your watch list for Halloween, you can do it. It's on Tubi. It's free. You have no excuse. Unless you don't like watching boys get killed, then that's okay. But yeah, that's what yeah.
Well, congratulations on your new career endeavors. Always cool to see when people are working on new creative projects. Post notifications on for Mary Beth as well. Make sure we stay up to date on all things Mary Beth McAndrews. As for me, I'm at Liam T. Crowley on all socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Most active on Instagram. And we got a whole bunch of interviews for a whole bunch of films coming out. If I listed them all now, we would talk longer than the duration of this podcast. So just keep it locked. It's going to be a very busy award season. I'm very, very blessed to get to cover a lot of films that are going to be likely at the ceremony next March, and it makes nomination season all the more fun. So keep it locked to my socials, keep it locked to ScreenRant.com, to my author profile as well. That's where all the interviews exist in both video and written form. And until next time, we will see you next week to talk about the greatest boy band of all time. I'm so excited.